Hello everyone, welcome to this new video in the Game Creator Basics series. In the first part we set up Game Creator Core itself. In this part we'll be looking at the inventory module. Before we get started, I'd like to thank all of my Patreon supporters for the amazing support. So first thing we'll do is we'll go to the package manager, we'll look up Game Creator, and we have the inventory module here. So we'll click import. If you don't have it installed yet, you'll have to download it first, and we click import. And this goes really fast because it's a small package. But then the next step is go to Game Creator, Module Manager, and this is where we actually unpack the package. So we're unpacking the module itself, and what we'll be doing as well is we'll be unpacking the examples. And especially in the case of inventory, the examples are extremely useful. Yes, let's keep it. So for Game Creator examples, and I know we've looked at previous examples before, we'll go to scenes and we'll go to inventory example, sure. And we have this level, and the reason this one is extremely interesting is because, well, the inventory module allows for quite a bit, and actually having a look at this scene shows us what we can do. So for one, press I to open the inventory, and we've got this prefab of a UI, and we'll be having a look at this UI prefab in a bit. We have these slots. And I do also want to show and explain a bit how these can be used for so much more than you might initially think. So we have coins, and coins is the built-in currency system for Game Creator. So when we look at here, we have a currency system, and this can be used for a lot as well. Then we have vendors, and okay, I'm guessing I'll click on him. Buy some keys, a potion. Drop the key on the door, and the door opens. And you know, it mentions combine this with a potion, and then we've got a new potion basically, which makes us smaller. And yeah, that's the thing. You know, we've got a lot of items here, skin mesh renderers. We can equip these on the character, which look completely ridiculous when we're small, but it's fun that we can do it, even though it looks absolutely absurd. Then we have storage containers where we can retrieve something. We have loot tables, box looted, cool. And we have our hotbar. So if we open up, I'm curious what's gonna happen next. Okay, we can't get any smaller than that. That would have been funny. And yeah, we can, you know, equip items to the character and the loot bar, etc., etc. Now, the interesting thing here is definitely this part, and we'll be having a look at that as well. So that's it for the scene. As you can see, extremely useful. It showcases quite a lot, but I think the most interesting parts here are definitely going to be the prefabs for the UI itself. And the reason I say prefabs is because they are just prefabs, but they do show us how to use everything. So when we go back to our basic scene, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how the module works. So here we have inventory, and we have a bunch of items here. We have item types, recipes for crafting, and we have some settings where we can drop in defaults. Now, it is important to realize that these are just defaults. You know, you can drag in, you don't have to use this at all really. That's why it says optional, but you know, just so you know, you don't have to do that. We have a couple of options as well. Limit inventory weight, so we can decide the weight here. Yes, you can tie this to a variable as well, meaning just like in Skyrim, you can increase your maximum weight, um, you know, by having it tied to a variable which you can then alter. So obviously that's quite important um, to have a look at. Can drop items. You know, we have all of the basics. The most important, obviously, is save inventory. That's the great thing with Game Creator. All of these data is by default saved. Pause time on UI is an important thing. This is mostly related to um, the prefab itself. So yeah, anyway. So recipes are quite simple. So as you can see, this is what we do. So if we create a new recipe, we can combine the sword and the shield, and we need, you know, 3 shields, and um, then we remove items on craft, so they'll get out of our inventory. And what we're going to do is we're going to inventory item add, and we'd add a hammer instead. So if you combine one sword with 3 shields, which makes 0 sense whatsoever, you get a hammer. Now obviously, as you can realize straight away, there is a limitation here because we can only combine 2 items at the same time. Now if you go over to the Game Creator Hub, there's an extended crafting system on the hub which allows you to combine many more items to craft something, so it can be closer to your you know, to your Skyrim dream. So keep that in mind. Just go to the Game Creator Hub and you'll find it there. Cool. So types are just categories we set ourselves, and they are important in how the UI part works as well. But you know, just to be clear, we can completely remove this and just add something else. For equipment, for example, we have general equipment, helmets, right hand, left hand equipment, and we can just, you know, add chest and you know, boots, gauntlets. You can add whatever you want. I mean, this is just these are categories we create ourselves. They are important, obviously, but you can, you know, fully change them into whatever you want them to be. Then in our catalog we have all of our inventory items, and let's make this a bit bigger. So we have everything we saw in the demo scene, and you can obviously just remove any of these. And the important thing is what they actually do. So if we have a look at the armor, for example, on click, it's adding general equipment helmets, which is a bit weird, but that's the only thing that was set up. So we now created chests, didn't we? Yes, so we'll change that to chest. Item type, chest. There we go. So now we've changed that to chest, and once we have a look at the UI, we'll change that as well. Now everything you can enter here, you know, is going to be relevant. So we have item name, armor, description, color. I haven't really ever used this too much, to be honest. The sprite, which obviously is important because that's the little icon you do see, so you know, quite important. We have a prefab, and the reason we have a prefab is because we can also drop inventory items, and you know, you might want to drop an actual item instead of just air. Can be sold, yes or no, what's the price, maximum stack, weight, so how many can you hold at once, how heavy is it, and on click will this consume the item. Now with a potion, that will be turned on, but with the armor it won't be. Now we have a couple of interesting things here as well. So we do have our traditional conditions, actions, and actions. So condition would be if a certain requirement must be met. So let's say a level. So if you have stats, you can do that with stats, but you can also have a character level in your variables. And if this would be character level, well, right at the start you're 1, I assume. And then the condition would be variable number, global variable, character level must be at least 5. And that's how you have a condition that you must at least be level 5. Obviously, if you do have the stats module as well, I'd recommend using the stats module rather than a global variable number, because dealing with XP, etc. in experience in with global variables is a tiny bit harder, let's just say it like that. Now, what happens once we equip this? We have this action, and it's really simple. Add skin mesh on armor. So the armor is a skin mesh renderer, and we want to add it on the invoker. And the invoker is the user of the inventory, basically. And on equip, we remove that skin mesh. Add, remove, and that's pretty much all it is. I'm going to remove this condition because we don't have a level system here. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. All of the other items are literally the same, and what it does is, so this hat is a normal mesh, not a skin mesh renderer, and we use the attach action to attach it to our head and remove it from our head. So works pretty much the same. Obviously, because it's not a skin mesh renderer, we do need some positioning in order to make sure it attaches itself the right way. Yes, we can select our bones because these are humanoid rigs, so that's great. But obviously, some limitations as to how well it will recognize where to place it, so you need to mess around a bit with positioning. So yeah, and that's how it works for the hammer, the shield, the sword. It all works literally exactly the same. The most important thing here, which we'll highlight, and it doesn't really matter which one it is that when we select item type, we can have multiple types, by the way, but when we have our, and I'm going to copy this, our basic action is going to be equip armor on evoker, and I'll explain in a bit why we need to do that as well. But this type needs to match with the actual type here, so they both need to have the item type and the type here match. Yes, there can be several here, but there can only be one here, and this one always needs to be in here. Cool. So that's it for the catalog. I'm not going to mess around too much with that. Obviously, if you want to create multiple swords, I'd create a system for yourself to manage this a bit better, because yes, it is just going to be a big list. So tackle them all at once, so all the weapons at once, so you can basically just duplicate them. They'll get a new ID if you duplicate them, by the way. So that's obviously quite important. They do get a new ID. And you can duplicate them, just, swap out, because, most likely all of these actions will be pretty much the same because they're all swords. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Now let's head over and have a look at the inventory UI. And we'll go to inventory, prefabs, inventory, and we have item adventure and item RPG here. And these are a couple of the things to modify your prefab, and I'm just going to look for yeah, there we go. So couldn't remember where it was housed, to be completely honest. Okay, so this is the one. So it's actually, apologies for that, it was actually in the examples, this prefab. So this is the default prefab we have, And you know, I've covered inventory so many times, and people often will ask me like, why don't you do it from scratch? Why do you always just grab the prefab? Um, I just want to be clear. This is just an inventory prefab. It just saves you tons of time if you just use the prefab itself. That's the reason why I do it. Yes, you obviously don't have to do that, but um, you know, if you want to save yourself some time and not have to look up which scripts did I have to enter where, it is going to be quite useful to just do that. So yes, I'll be doing that yet again simply because um, it's going to save me a lot of time. So yeah, cool. So the important part with the inventory UI is that it consists of several parts here. So we have a couple of displays, and I want to go over a bit how these work. So let's unpack this one. Um, and the important thing here is that this is just a normal inventory. We just have a couple of things pre-set up. So as you can see, we need the inventory UI manager script, and it needs a floating item, with the floating item being this little square here. We have a really important part. We have the animator, and by default, I'm going to create something here just to show you how this works. So let's turn this off. And right now I'll oh, sorry about that. Right now I'll do the basic here. So I'm going to go game creator, trigger, key down. I'm going to replicate that condition. So you know we're going to use on key down I, just like in the demo, and we're going to do a simple active condition. So is this turned on, turned off? Then we're going to turn it on. Another clause, if this is turned on, we're going to turn it off. It's really basic. So this condition basically just checks, is this item enabled, and that's our UI. Yeah, no, then we enable it. Yes, then we disable it, and that's it. Now I'm going to show you why this won't work as well. I know that that can be a bit confusing. So right now if I press I, you will see it open real fast and just, you know, close off again, which is kind of weird, and that's because by default Game Creator actually uses something else. So I'm going to disable this trigger. I'm going to add a new trigger here. And we'll do on key down as well. I won't do the full condition. I'm just going to do a simple action here to display how it works. So when we go to actions and we go to inventory actions, you will see inventory UI, inventory open, close. And now if I press play and I press I, it will open the inventory, and you saw that there for a brief moment we have this tiny little animation. So it's you know, looks cool, looks sweet, and it's a tiny little animation. Now that animation is the reason why you can't control it the regular way as well. So I'm going to remove this trigger, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our inventory here, and I'm going to remove this animator. Now I'll turn on my previous trigger. Let's disable this yet again. And now when I press I, it opens up, and I again, and it closes. So that little animator is actually related to the actions for the inventory. So that's the reason why. So if you've come across this and you're like, why does it automatically close again? Well, that's why it does. Cool. So let's head back to our inventory UI and have a look at how all of this works. So we have a couple of elements here, and it's actually in the prefab, it's divided pretty well. So we have the inventory and we have the equipment part. Now the equipment part is basically the slots we set up. So let's have a look. So we have a couple of containers, and this is another reason why I would recommend actually using the prefabs here, is that unless you have a really good understanding of how um, the Unity UI system works, it can be a bit difficult to figure out for yourself how to create this. And that's the thing, this prefab is just a standard Unity UI, and if you want to build it from scratch without having to use a prefab and you're not able to, that has nothing to do with the game creator inventory system. That's just Unity UI. So you know, this is using Unity UI. If you want to learn a bit more about it, I'd recommend watching some videos on just general Unity UI. Cool. So what we have here in the equipment part is we have a container, and a container is just a UI box which has a couple of really nice advantages. So as you can see, we have a vertical layout group, spacing 20, and it's, you know, forces the sizes of these things. Now if, for example, let's drag this out, you want this to be horizontal, then we're going to remove this container, and I'll keep the spacing. So remove, and I'm going to do a horizontal layout group, and spacing 20, and we'll keep everything else the same. And yeah, the container size obviously needs to change as well. And that's, you know, we have another restraint here. There's so many different restraints. Anyway, but yeah, that's basically how you do it. So I'm just going to do Ctrl Z, and you know, we go back to its original size. But yeah, these are all just Unity UI elements, and you know, if you want to learn a bit more about them, then I definitely recommend watching some Unity videos on that. Now here we have something more game creator related. We have our equipment slots. And remember when I mentioned that those categories are actually quite important? It's because of these slots. So these slots decide what we can equip, and this is the helmet slot. Now I changed the chest to, you know, the armor to go to a chest slot. So I want to add an additional one. So I'm just literally going to duplicate this. I'm going to put it in the middle. As you can see, it no longer fits. Because yeah, it's a bit big now. So I'm pretty sure we can just expand this. Where's the background? Cool. So now we have an additional slot, and that additional slot is, yeah, something like this is fine. Yeah, there's too many groups. Let's do this again. I'm going to Ctrl Z all of this. Let's try it like this. Cool. So now we have the full size. If the background is correct and the container is now too big, and we can reduce the container. There we go. So now we have an additional slot, and that additional slot is for, you know, for the armor. I'm pretty sure we don't have an armor icon, but I just want to put something else here. And this is the wrong icon, obviously. It looks horrible. Doesn't matter. And there we go. This is now our armor slot. Now let's rename this to armor. And the important part here is that we now change this to chest, because that's the category we created for the armor slot. Now, as you can see, we have a couple of you know, a couple of UI actions happening as well. So we're changing images, or just changing the background. If you want to change those images to something else, well, this is where you do it. Cool. So that's it for the equipment part. This is a really cool part. I've actually, the equipment part, used this in a mobile game to create a weapon attachment system like you have in, you know, most shooters these days, where you can attach red dots extended magazines, etc., etc. And it really works this simple. So basically, I've used these slots, completely changed the way the UI looks, obviously, and this is how I equip items on guns, so attachments, etc., etc. And basically, you attach them. Um, just like you do with most other things. So it seems a bit limited in this sense, but it actually isn't. You can even use these slots to add ruins to your existing weapons if you wanted to. So this can be used for so much more than just these basic things. You just have to get a bit creative with it, and that's what I love about Game Creator. It's easy to get creative. Cool. So let's boil this down a bit. So here when we have our equipment part, we have this menu bar, and that's the top part. And what this menu bar does is basically it changes our filters. So as you can see, sure, some UI changes, but basically we're changing filters. So we're changing filter to only display potions, and if we press this one, we're changing it to equipment. I'm just going to do everything here because I'm not sure if I grouped my armory and equipment. So this will be only potions, and this is going to be everything. But you can just filter it to whatever you want it to be. So yeah, pretty cool. Weight literally just displays the weight, and as you can see, the way it works is you add a normal text and a little inventory script. You can change the formatting. That's how simple it is. Same with currency. It's a little script that basically allows it to automatically display the currency we have in our system. And that's how simple it is. Now, the biggest part obviously is going to be this itself, the container items. This is where we house everything in our inventory. And as you can see, by default, it's a draggable panel as well here, which is, yeah, I don't really know why it is. So we have our viewport, and we have our scroll bar, and I want to highlight again that if you want to learn more about this is just Unity UI stuff. Has little to do with Game Creator itself. So we're going to go down to what actually is Game Creator itself, and that's this. So item lists, the content, what is it displaying, and this is what it's displaying by default, by the way, so general potions. But you can set the default to display nothing, so we'll do nothing. And then we'll decide with these filters how to change what it displays. So obviously we need some items, so I'm going to do add a simple trigger here. Let's turn this back off. Let's add a basic trigger on start, and we're going to add a ton of actions. And this is a nice place to also look at some of the inventory actions. So when we go to inventory, we have deselect item. We have equip item, which is obviously going to be one of the most important things. Bind item to hotbar, unbind to hotbar, which is really cool because the hotbar obviously can be used, like in a lot of games, to quickly swap between items. So we have actions for that as well. Instantiate skin mesh. This is really important. For example, in one of my games, I'm using DAS 3D, and clothing items are skin mesh renderers. So having this action is essential. We have currency, so we can add currency, subtract currency. So that's for the shops. Use recipe. Shop, which I'll go over at the end because that's actually pretty simple and pretty easy to do. But the most important parts are going to be item, instantiate item, drop item, and the other actions are mostly in the UI itself or in our preferences. So I'm going to do item add. I'm going to add my hat. I'm going to add my sword. I'm going to add my shields and my armor. So let's have a look and see if I did it right with the armor. Cool, I'm going to press I. We have our inventory, and if you remember, I did nothing on start, so on start nothing displays. And here we have all of our basic things. So if I add this now, you can see we have our armor attached, we have our hats. I don't remember which one was which, so there we go. And yeah, and as you can see, we have it all attached now. We have different slots for our chest and our helmet, and that's really how simple it is to add additional slots to your character. It really can be that simple. So yeah, pretty cool. And yeah, that's basically how you add additional slots. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to do. And the reason this won't work, by the way, is because we're not using the inventory UI actions anymore. We're just treating this as a normal standard UI. And it doesn't mean you can't use animations anymore, because obviously you can do that with Unity UI as well. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. So that's it for the inventory UI. As you can see, it's mostly just UI work and a couple of things that link it to the inventory system. Now, one last thing is going to be the merchant part and merchant UI. Let's hope this is it. Yes, there we go. So merchant UI basically works pretty similar in the sense that it's just a UI with a couple of actions. So we have our our currency yet again. Now merchant name, I'll show this in a bit why this is less relevant. So you can just keep this as is. And yeah, this prefab is mostly just about changing the looks. You can add a couple of more things that will display, of course, but the important thing here is going to be related to this item here itself, and this is the merchant UI, and obviously I selected the icons instead. There we go. So these are in the examples as well, and these scripts basically decide what the merchant is holding, what his name is. That's why I mentioned the name doesn't really matter, because it's going to be replaced anyway. And the same for our loot table. As you can see, the loot table is incredibly similar as well. So we have amount, weight for our chances basically. We can expand this to be as large as you want, and for the merchant table exactly the same. We can limit the amount that he actually sells, what he's selling we can decide as well, and we can decide how expensive everything is. Yet again, these can be tied to global variables, which is amazing because in games like Skyrim we can improve our bartering skills as well. So we get more for our money, things become cheaper, discounts, etc, etc. So that's why it's really cool we can tie this to global variables. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the inventory system. Obviously this was a quick glance at it, and you can do so much more with this, but I do want to highlight that it actually does allow you to do so much more. So it's not just adding some equipment on your player. This can be used for other items as well. You can add sockets for for swords. You can do weapon attachments. It's at first it seems a bit simple, but there's quite a lot you can do with it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.